are at the last part of lesson 1.8, part 4. We're going to actually code our button, and the reason we want to do that is because when we run the application, anytime that the button is pressed, we want it to do something. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create what's called an outlet for our UI elements. Remember that our user interface elements are the labels, the text boxes, and the buttons. So the first thing that we'll do is go up here to the toolbar, and we're going to click on the two circles, and this is our assistant editor. So this is where the code, this is View Controller Swift, this is going to be the code that we add, where we put the code for the button. And then I want to have more room, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the right hand side of my screen, and I'm okay with the left hand side. When you open yours, you're not going to see this comment here. I added a comment called properties, and mark, anytime that you have mark, is a special word that allows people when they're looking at your code to navigate through it and find certain things, and we'll talk more about that, about this particular comment. But comments are not, they're how should I say, they're compiled, but the compiler skips that code, so it's not actually processed. So the comments are for people, for you, the coder, and for people who read your code. So people who go back into your code and edit, it's for them to help them figure out what's going on. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is going to add an outlet to see here, we're going to add the outlet first to the text field. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the text field, and we're going to press the control button. So make sure you have the control button pressed. I've got the control button pressed, and then I'm going to drag. Notice there's a little, this little line here, and it says insert outlet action or outlet collection. So I'm going to let go. Pops up a little window, and what I want first is I want to add an outlet. So this is my dialog box appears. I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to call it name text field. Notice the way that we name objects and we name variables. We have the camel, what we call the camelback format, where we start with lowercase letter, and then every word after that is going to be a capital letter. So the name is name text field. And then we're going to leave all the other options like that, because I want to actually create an outlet. So that's already there. And I'm going to click on connect. Okay, notice that when I did that, it created IB outlet, weak variable. My variable's name text field of type UI text field. So let's just take a minute to understand what's happening in this one line of code right here. Okay. So the IB outlet attribute tells Xcode that you can connect to the name text field property from interface builder, which is why the attribute has the IB prefix. The weak keyword indicates that the reference does not prevent the system from deallocating the reference object. Weak references help prevent reference cycles. However, to keep the object alive and in memory, you need to make sure some other part of your app has a strong reference to the object. So in this case, it's a text field superview. A superview just maintains a strong reference to all of its subviews. As long as the superview remains alive and in memory, all of the subviews are going to also remain alive and in memory. Similarly, the view controller has a strong reference to its content view, keeping the entire view hierarchy alive and in memory. The rest of the declaration defines an implicit unwrapped optional variable of type UI text field, name text field. So the name text field is of type UI text field. You know how we defined variables like amount of type integer or amount of type double? This is the same thing. This is the type of this variable. It's a text field. It's a little bit more complex than an integer or Boolean or something like that. When a view controller is loaded from a storyboard, the system instantiates, oh gosh, this is a word that I can never say. You get an instance of the hierarchy, and it assigns the appropriate value to all the view controller outlets. So by the time that the view controller's view did load method is called, the system has assigned valid values to all of the controller outlets, and you can safely access their contents. So now what we're going to do is we're going to connect the label to our code in the same way that we connected the text field to our code. So we're going to click on the label. We're going to press Control, click on the label, and then drag, and opens. So this is our button. We're going to call it meal. Oh no, I'm sorry. I chose the button. I want to choose I don't want the button. I want this one, the label. So I'm going to click on Control. Okay, there we go. And then this is going to call meal name label. Meal name label. And then we're going to leave everything the same because this is also an outlet. Okay. Again, Xcode adds the necessary code to view controller.swift to store a reference to the label and configures the storyboard to set up that connection. So now, if we want to do something to the text field or the label, we can just use these names here and then decide what we want to do. We can change the color of the text, we can change the background of the button, we can change what the text says, we can do all kinds of stuff now that we've created this outlet. So the only time that you need to create an outlet is if you plan to either access a value from the interface object or you modify the interface object. So if you don't plan to do anything to that object, if you don't have to do anything to this label at all, then you don't need an outlet. It's only if we plan to do something, change something about it, okay? So now the next thing is we have to now act on something. So we have to act on some action like pressing of the button. So what we're going to do is we're going to define an action to perform. An action, or what we call an action method, is a piece of code that's linked to an event that can occur in your app. When that event takes place, the system is going to execute the action code. So, for example, if I create an action code for pressing of the button, then it's going to go to that method and execute the code. We're going to create an action the same way that we created the outlet. We're going to control drag from the object into our storyboard. And then this is going to create our method in our view controller that gets triggered when a user interacts with the object. So we're going to start by creating a simple action that sets the label to default text whenever the user taps the Set Default Text button. Okay, so if we tap this button, we want to set this back to our default text. The code to set the label to the text is the text field. I'm sorry, the code to set the label to the text in the text field is a bit more involved, but we'll do this one first. It's going to be a little bit easier. So we're going to set default label text action. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and in View Controller Swift over here, just above this very last curly brace, we're going to add mark actions. So mark actions. So this is the section of our code that's going to list all the actions. So notice that this curly brace goes with this one, so we don't want to put the text there. This curly brace here ends our class, so we want to put it right above the ending of our class. So in our storyboard now, we're going to select the Set Default Label Text button. Okay. We're going to control drag from the Set Default Text button on our canvas to right under that comment that I made. And then we're going to let go. So press the control button and then drag. And it pops up a window for us. Now on this one, remember earlier we created an outlet. Now we want to change this to create an action. And we want to name our action. So this is going to be called Set Default Label Text. You can name your action anything that you want. And then the type of this action is going to be UI button. So you may have noticed that the value of the type field defaults to any object. In Swift, any object is a type used to describe an object that can belong to any class. Specify the type of this action method to be UI button means that only button objects can connect to this action. Although this isn't significant for the action you're creating right now, it's important to remember for later. And then we'll just leave everything as it is. So basically, I can use this Set Default Label Text method on any button. So if I had 5 buttons on here, I could use this method for all 5 buttons. And I just want to make sure that to control, as far as controlling for errors, if I set it to just buttons, then I'm being safe. I'm just writing good code or safe code. So we press connect and it creates a function or a method called Set Default Label Text, and the sender is UI button. So UI button, this button is sending me something, and then whatever it sends me, depending on what it sends me, I'm going to do whatever I code in here. So whatever code I put, I'm going to put inside these curly braces. Okay. So again, that sender parameter here is the one that's responsible for triggering the action. In this case, it's the button. And then this attribute here, IB action, indicates that the method is an action that you can connect to from storyboard. Oh, goodness. Remind me later, please. So right now the method declaration is empty. So there's nothing inside the method declaration. And what we're going to do is inside them, we're going to add meal. If you remember, our label is called meal name label dot text. So these are the things that I can change for my meal label. I can change the text. I can change the text color, text alignment, all kinds of stuff. So right now I'm going to just change the text and I'm going to set it to my default text. So the text property is set to default text. Notice that you didn't have to specify the type of default text because Swift type interface can see that you're assigning to something of type string. iOS handles all of the redrawing code for you, so this is actually all the code you need to write for now. Your set default label text action method should look like this. It just has one line. So what we're going to do now is we're going to test our changes by running the simulator. When you click, so let's run it here. It's building. When you click the Set Default Label Text button, your Set Default Label Text method is called, and the meal name label object's text value changes from meal name to default text. So right now, so when I click this button, it's going to go to my UI button action method, and it's going to change this label to these words. The only reason that I can use meal name label is because up here I defined a variable called meal name label. So if this doesn't work, make sure you have this typed correctly. It has to be spelled the same. Gotta have these quotes because it's text, otherwise it doesn't work. And text has to be lowercase and it has to be shown as purple. Okay, so I'm going to click on Set Default Label Text, and boom, it changes to default text. So it did what I said. So we looked at how to create an outlet. So these are our outlets. So we're creating our variables so we can reference our different objects. And then we created an action so that we can say, oh yeah, when we press the button, here's what I want you to do. So maybe play around with this code, change something else about the text. When you click the code, what you can do is you can change something about the button, change something about the label. Okay? And that's the end of this lesson.